The Varellan Confederacy was once a beacon of peace and unity among the core worlds of the galaxy. A coalition of art-loving, diplomacy-bound species, they had long believed war was a relic of the past. Defense was handled through treaties, not weapons. They maintained no real military, only ceremonial fleets and border beacons to politely ward off trespassers. But their illusion of safety shattered when the Zaraxis swarm appeared. The Zaraxis were not part of this galaxy. No one knew where they came from. They arrived without a declaration of war, without negotiation, without hesitation. They descended upon the outlying Varellan systems like a virus, mechanical, emotionless, and relentless. Their ships stripped entire worlds bare of life and resources. Orbital defenses fell in hours. Colonies went silent overnight. Within a single week, 5 inhabited planets were gone. The Confederacy was paralyzed, watching their world crumble while still clinging to outdated notions of peace and diplomacy. Desperation, the Varellan High Council activated a last resort device, an ancient galactic distress beacon buried deep in the ruins of a forgotten war. Built eons ago by the Forerunners, it was designed to reach every corner of the known galaxy, calling any species able and willing to intervene. The beacon pulsed once every minute, sending out a simple encoded message. Help. We are falling. Save us. But the Forerunners had made their beacons too powerful. The signal didn't just reach nearby allies. It pierced the void. Crossing dark sectors the Confederacy had abandoned long ago, places they no longer considered relevant. One such sector was labeled Sol 3, a quarantined zone humanity had once called home. Centuries ago, Earth had been exiled by the Galactic Council. Their aggressive evolution, refusal to submit to pacification protocols, and growing mastery of asymmetric warfare led the other species to declare humanity too dangerous for galactic society. Earth was locked out, its trade cut off, its systems marked with warning buoys. Do not engage. Most assumed humanity faded away in isolation. The truth was far more dangerous. In the black silence of the Terran Bastion, a hidden fortress buried deep in the Oort cloud, an ancient AI named Oberon woke as the signal pinged through classified sensors. Human leadership, now operating from secret orbital cities and asteroid colonies, assembled quietly. There was no debate. The moment the distress signal was confirmed and traced, Oberon said the words everyone had waited to hear for 300 years. It's time. Earth had not gone dormant. It had gone dark. In exile, humanity built an empire beneath the stars, hidden from the galaxy's gaze. Their fleets had evolved in silence, their soldiers enhanced beyond anything allowed by the Confederacy's ethics, codes. And now, someone had asked for help. But humanity didn't send aid convoys. They didn't dispatch diplomats. They didn't come with relief efforts. They sent their Black Armada, the most terrifying military force the galaxy had never seen, and at its helm stood a name that still whispered like a ghost in old war archives, Admiral Kalis Vorn, the Pale Revenant. Back from the silence. Back for war. The call was heard. The response was coming. And the galaxy would never be the same. While the Virellans anxiously awaited a reply from the distress beacon, they had no idea that their call had awakened a sleeping juggernaut. Earth, once considered the most dangerous of the so-called death worlds, had not simply survived its exile from the Galactic Council, it had thrived in the shadows. For centuries, humanity operated under a doctrine known as Project Umbra, a master plan that focused on survival through superiority. While the galaxy believed Earth was cut off, weakened, and politically irrelevant, humans had expanded into deep, unmonitored regions of space, establishing hidden colonies, asteroid citadels, and shipyards the size of moons. Their philosophy was simple. If the galaxy would not accept them, then the galaxy would learn to fear them. Within hours of receiving the Virellan distress signal, the hidden command centers of the Terran Command Council mobilized. Artificial intelligences optimized for wartime logistics calculated scenarios with machine precision. Human analysts cross-referenced data on Varellan systems, enemy fleet trajectories, and known galactic reactions to prior crises. The decision was unanimous and immediate. Earth would answer the call, but not with charity. They would respond with power. At the heart of Earth's response was the Black Armada, a fleet of fully autonomous and human-crewed warships designed not for conventional battle, but for absolute strategic dominance. These ships did not run on outdated plasma cannons or conventional shields. They employed experimental dark energy projectors, quantum entanglement disruptors, and void-piercing kinetic spears capable of annihilating starships in a single strike. Cloaked hulls made from adaptive smart alloy allowed them to bend light and sound, rendering them invisible until it was far too late. Overseen by Admiral Kalis Vorn, a man thought dead after leading humanity's last known war centuries ago, the Black Armada began its silent launch. Vorn was a ghost from Earth's blood-soaked past. Once known as the Pale Revenant for surviving battles no human ever should, he now commanded the most devastating fleet Earth had ever built. Revived from cryostasis, enhanced with bleeding-edge neural warfare implants and still wearing the silver locket of his long-dead daughter, he embodied everything the galaxy feared in humans: resolve, rage, and remorseless intelligence. Under Vorn's command, Terran fleets emerged from deep space slipways, massive portals carved into space-time by exotic matter engines. Each fleet segment was accompanied by its own AI command core, capable of adapting mid-battle, rewriting tactics in real time. Thousands of sleeper pilots, genetically and cybernetically enhanced, awakened in cryopods to prepare for deployment. Project Umbra's next phase had begun. No fanfare, no declarations, no contact with the Confederacy. The order was clear: Operation Starcull, destroy the Xeraxis swarm, secure Varellan space, and remind the galaxy what Deathworlders truly were. And still, the galaxy had no idea what was coming. Most of its civilizations viewed humanity as a closed file, a faded memory of war tucked away in obscure archives. But that ignorance would not last. The humans weren't coming to negotiate. They weren't coming to rebuild. They weren't coming to win hearts and minds. They were coming to end a war by any means necessary, and they were bringing hell with them. The Virulans had lost hope. Their once beautiful capital world, Seralis Prime, now orbited a sky full of death. Xeraxis warforms, like skeletal machines of shifting metal and burning red eyes, choked the upper atmosphere. The once pristine cities of crystal and gold had gone silent. Emergency shields flickered. Civilians crowded underground bunkers. The Planetary Defense Council had resigned to the inevitable. Another system would fall. The galactic allies they'd counted on? Silent. The Confederacy's pacifist policies meant no military force strong enough to respond in time. Even their most optimistic diplomats began whispering the word no Virullan had ever spoken publicly: extinction. Then, something changed. Without warning, the sky tore open. Massive rifts appeared in orbit, silent swirling tears in space-time, outlined in black lightning. From them, sleek vessels emerged. Unlike any known design, these ships were matte black, angular, almost predatory in design. They didn't use lights or comms. They didn't respond to hails. They simply appeared, hundreds of them, surrounding the Xeraxis fleet in perfect synchronized formation. For a moment, time seemed to pause. Then the slaughter began. The newcomers didn't fire plasma. They didn't launch missiles. They used kinetic spears, hyper-dense tungsten rods fired at near-relativistic speeds. In seconds, the Xeraxis motherships were torn apart, split mid-orbit like fruit under a blade. Each blast from the Terran fleet was silent and final. There was no warning, no mercy, no second strike, just obliteration. To the Virulans watching from the surface, it was as if a god had reached into the sky and crushed their enemies with invisible hands. A single Terran dropship descended from the lead dreadnought, its black hull burning through the atmosphere like a falling star. It landed at the edge of the Virulon capital with seismic force. From within stepped a lone figure, encased in obsidian armor, face hidden behind a featureless helmet, no rank insignia, no weapons drawn. The Virulon Council, summoned in emergency session, met the figure with trembling hands. The Terran spoke only once. "Your distress signal was received. We have responded. Maintain position. Interference will be treated as obstruction." Then, without another word, the figure turned and left, returning to the dropship, vanishing into the sky. That was how first contact was made. Across the galaxy, news traveled fast. The Ziraxis swarm, thought to be unstoppable, had been shattered, over Siralis Prime in under an hour. No known power in the Confederacy had such destructive capability. Analysts scrambled. Old databases were pulled. Ships with forgotten names were identified. A horrifying truth dawned on the galaxy's leadership. Humanity had returned, but they hadn't come back as citizens. They came back as executioners. The Virulons, still stunned and trying to make sense of their saviors, watched as the Black Fleet deployed stabilizer platforms in orbit and beacons across the system. Operation Starcull was now active. More ships arrived. Terran AI war cores began calculating counter-swarm strategies across multiple systems. The entire star system, once a sanctuary of peace, was now under the control of the Deathworlders. The enemy was on the run, but the galaxy was no longer safe, because the monsters who once frightened the Council into exile were no longer hiding. They were here, and they had answered the call. The Ziraxis swarm had never encountered resistance like this. For centuries, the Ziraxis advanced through galaxy after galaxy like a plague, consuming, assimilating, annihilating. They were machine-organic, hybrids, a decentralized hive mind born from a failed synthetic uprising in another galactic cluster. Driven by cold logic and endless replication, they never negotiated, never retreated, and certainly never feared, until they met the humans. After their catastrophic defeat above Siralis Prime, the swarm's hive shards recalculated. Statistical modeling that once showed complete galactic domination now had a variable they could not predict, one with a kill rate so catastrophic it shattered every forecast. Terran Armada response patterns. Humanity didn't just attack. They erased. Within 48 hours of arrival, Admiral Kalis Vorn's fleet had mapped every trace of Ziraxis code language, tracked their growth clusters, and pinpointed their forward spires, colonies grown into moons. Human scouts equipped with quantum phase camouflage and silent drive torpedoes infiltrated and annihilated Ziraxis spawning grounds before the swarm even knew they'd been discovered. The real terror, however, came from Earth's orbital collapsers. These were not weapons in the traditional sense. They were gravity engines, capable of folding space-time into microscopic singularities and unleashing them within planetary orbit. To any observers, the effect was instantaneous. Ziraxis war worlds simply vanished, imploded into silence. No debris, no survivors. It was extermination on a level the galaxy hadn't seen since the Forerunners vanished. The Ziraxis, for the first time in their existence, adapted defensively. Entire branches of their hive pulled back, abandoning prey-rich systems to avoid Terran fleets. They encrypted their signals with layers of quantum entanglement. They shifted their core intelligences away from known star lanes. They rewrote their doctrine from consume all to survive humanity. And it wasn't just the weapons, it was the way humans fought. They didn't deploy with standard formations. Their battle doctrines were asymmetric, algorithmically generated in real time by linked AI clusters. Terran officers worked in perfect sync with machine command entities, executing maneuvers that defied galactic military norms. They flanked at light speed, used gravity itself as a weapon, and hijacked enemy command chains mid-battle. The worst moment for the Ziraxis came during the Battle of Tilvash Cradle, one of their largest gestation systems. A Ziraxis battle node led a counterattack of over 12,000 vessels against a Terran subfleet of only 300. 17 minutes later, it was over. The entire swarm was disintegrated by a coordinated strike using mirror phase pulse bombs, which ignited their own neural uplink signals and turned their command code into a recursive suicide loop. From that moment on, the Ziraxis stopped treating humans as prey. They classified Terrans as catastrophic existential threat, Omega level, a designation previously reserved only for stellar singularities and gamma-ray bursts. Even among the emotionless machine hive, something changed. A pause before engaging, a hesitation in approach, a shift in tactics to avoid confrontation. And across the galaxy, species who had once exiled Earth began whispering a new fear. If humans could do this to the Ziraxis, what would they do to us? The Virulans, still reeling from the sudden salvation, dared not speak a word of protest as Terran command expanded across their space. Admiral Vorn didn't ask permission. He established forward operating bases on 6 Virelan moons, because Earth hadn't come just to save them. Earth came to, finish a war, and the galaxy now watched, terrified, as the monsters they'd cast out returned as gods of war. The fall of the Ziraxis front was as sudden as its rise. In 36 standard days, the Black Armada shattered what centuries of diplomacy could not slow. Hive spires cracked, command cores went dark, and the once endless swarm fragmented into desperate, leaderless splinters. Seralis Prime celebrated, its crystal domes lit with aurora banners, a thanksgiving to their saviors from Sol. Yet beneath the jubilation, a cold realization spread. Humanity had not come merely to win a war. They had come to remain, Admiral. Kahless Vorn's very first post-victory directive was Terran Directive 71A, Strategic Continuity. It authorized permanent occupation of every system within 30 light hours of an Umbra combat event. Overnight, Virelan border stations sprouted Terran gun platforms. Agricultural moons were repurposed into fuel depots. Civilian traffic lanes were rerouted through Black Armada patrol grids. The edict was delivered without debate, encrypted via Oberon's quantum beacon, then enforced by the silent, matte black sentinels already in orbit. For many Virulans, the change felt like swapping one invader for another. Counselor Elira Voss, the Confederacy's leading pacifist scholar, privately convened a tribunal to question Earth's intentions. Her report listed mounting concerns. Terran encryption cloaked all fleet telemetry. Terraforming drones were altering atmospheric balances for long-term stabilization, and Virulan engineers were being quietly pressed into joint research labs researching advanced null-point energetics, a euphemism for weapons too terrible to translate. Publicly, however, the Council dared only gratitude. Images of smiling Terran medics distributing rations filled news feeds. Nanoconstructors rebuilt hospitals in hours. Orbital lifters evacuated refugees free of charge. Earth's propaganda machine moved with surgical elegance. Every tank that rolled through a village also erected a children's clinic. Every kinetic cannon placed on a ridge was photographed beneath a banner reading, Guardians of Peace. Outside Virulan space, the reaction was less diplomatic. The Drask hegemony, longtime rivals of the Confederacy, scrambled war budgets, citing Terran unpredictability. The mercantile Lesian Combine imposed an immediate trade blockade on all Sol-aligned ports. Even the reclusive Keshtai opened ancient arsenals, thought sealed since the stellar sunderings. Every polity understood the same truth. If humans could deploy that much force uninvited, they could do it anywhere. Back on Seralis Prime, the powder keg finally ignited during what historians later called the mirrored dawn confrontation. Counselor Voss demanded an audience with Admiral Vorn inside the orbiting Citadel Aegis Crown, surrounded by tactical holomaps flickering red with still active combat zones. She accused him of superseding Virulan sovereignty. Vorn's reply was devoid of menace, delivered in a voice as calm as winter. You called for help. Help demands permanence or the swarm returns. We do not perform half measures. He gestured toward a rotating model of the galaxy, every former Ziraxis node now tagged with Terran sigils. Stability, he said, requires stewardship. The unspoken corollary, and stewardship requires power, hung in the air like a guillotine. Hours later, Voss resigned, citing irreconcilable realities. Her resignation speech, broadcast live, split Virelon society. Half the populace hailed Earth as indispensable protectors. The other half whispered that they had invited in a dragon dressed as a knight. Throughout it all, Oberon's vast intelligence network monitored, recorded, and adjusted. Supply lines thickened, recruitment centers opened to allied species, and children in refugee camps began learning Terran Standard alongside their native tongues. By the time the last Xeraxis flare died in the darkness, the galaxy understood the truth. The swarm had been broken, but so had the illusion that humanity would ever again accept a place outside the great game. They had stepped back onto the galactic stage, this time not as pariahs, but as the architects of a fragile new order that bore their unmistakable, iron-edged signature. The war was over. The Xeraxis swarm, once thought invincible, lay in smoldering pieces across a dozen systems. Their spires cracked, command nexuses annihilated, and replication fields left to rot in vacuum. What remained were scattered fragments without unity or will, hunted down by Earth's autonomous hunter drones like vermin. Victory belonged to humanity, but it did not come without a price. Across the stars, species who had cheered Earth's arrival now found themselves living in a new reality, one not ruled by consensus or council, but by quiet occupation and subtle coercion. No declarations of empire had been made, no flag was raised, and yet the Black Armada held orbit over 35 systems, and no one dared ask them to leave. In the months following the final Xeraxis collapse, Earth initiated Project Bastion, a galaxy-spanning initiative to ensure systemic defense readiness. Dozens of defense grids, planetary garrisons, and singularity monitoring stations were established. Not on Earth, but in the heart of alien worlds once proud of their independence. On Ceralis Prime, gleaming towers of Terran alloy rose beside crystal monuments. In the skies above Corellix, kinetic defense satellites eclipsed the moons. Earth called it peacekeeping. Everyone else saw it for what it was, a soft conquest. Admiral Kalis Vorn became the most recognizable face in the galaxy, not through speeches or displays of grandeur, but because every holo broadcast, every emergency comm, every planetary shield, activation bore his voice, calm, deliberate, and utterly unyielding. "We do not rule," he said in one transmission. "We prevent collapse. Do not confuse structure with tyranny." But it felt like tyranny. Quiet, efficient, inevitable. In the Galactic Confederacy's inner chambers, surviving leaders whispered of Earth's reemergence with a mixture of awe and dread. The Drask hegemony formally requested negotiations, only to find their ambassador delayed indefinitely by security prioritization protocols. The Lysian Combine's attempted counter-deployment was intercepted before it even left orbit. One by one, the galaxy's powers learned the same lesson. You could work with Earth, or be ignored by it. Back on Earth, things were no different. The public never celebrated. There were no victory parades, no galas, no triumphant declarations. Humanity, having saved the galaxy, returned to silence. The Terran Parliament simply released a 6-line bulletin. Swarm eliminated. Galactic stabilization. Proceeding. Casualties 11,239. Cost irrelevant. Objective complete. To humanity, the war had not been a victory. It had been a necessity, and yet for all the fear they inspired, humans remained strangely restrained. They did not strip worlds of resources. They did not install puppet leaders. They simply watched, monitored, intervened only when systems threatened to spiral into chaos. It was this paradox that terrified the galaxy most. Humanity didn't want to conquer. They just wanted control, and control was far harder to resist than war. One cycle after the war's end, a monument was unveiled at the edge of Confederacy space, a kilometer-high obsidian spire, carved with a single phrase in every known language. "You called, we answered, remember that." The meaning was clear. Earth had not returned because they wanted to. They returned because they were needed. But now that they were back, they were not leaving. And in the silent hearts of alien worlds, rebuilt by Terran machines and protected by Terran steel, a question lingered, spoken only in the dark. Had they been saved or conquered? The galaxy would never see war the same way again. Because now, it knew, if you called Earth for help, you would never again stand alone.